So how did vitamins get their name? Well, these days everyone is talking about vitamins because everyone is interested in health. But the word itself was actually coined around 1911 by a Polish chemist by the name of Casimir Funk. Funk had become interested in a disease called beriberi, which in an old Sri Lankan language means I cannot. And he became familiar with this disease, which struck a number of Asians after the process of milling rice changed. When they brought in the rice mill and people started eating polished rice instead of whole rice, they started to come down with this ailment where they just lost energy and they kind of slowly withered away. It was called beriberi, meaning I cannot. And Funk basically determined that there was some material in the hulk of the rice, which if thrown away and not eaten, would in fact cause disease. This was some kind of a deficiency. And he called whatever there was in the hull of the rice a vitamin. The reason he called it vitamin was from the Latin vita, meaning life, and he thought that this particular kind of chemical belonged into a class of molecules called amines. So he called it vitamin. Originally, it had an ending E. This eventually was eliminated when it was discovered that not all of these substances fell into the amine category. But he didn't really know what vitamins were. He just thought that they were special substances found in the outer covering of the rice. About a year later, it was an American by the name of Ernest McGill who really started the naming process. He ran some experiments with rats, and he discovered that if the rats were fed nothing but lard, they didn't do well. Their eyesight deteriorated and their bodies deteriorated as well. But when he fortified their diet with butterfat or with egg yolk, they became healthy again. So he said that whatever there was in butterfat or in egg yolk was a very special substance. It was like Casimir Funk's vitamin, but it was a different material. And he suggested that this be called fat-soluble A. I think taking the letter A, giving himself credit for the discovery, but realizing that Funk's chemicals were very similar, and he suggested that they be called water-soluble B. At that time, they weren't called vitamins. That came a little bit later. Well, it turned out that Funk's water-soluble B was actually not one specific substance. It was a mix of substances. So thus, the B vitamin family was born. It turned out, however, that when they started to separate the components, they called the first one vitamin B1, then B2, B3, B4, that some of them turned out not to be vitamins. So we no longer have a vitamin B4, going by the classic definition of what a vitamin is. It's a substance that we must have in the diet in order to prevent certain deficiency diseases. So A and B were the first ones named. However, not the first ones discovered. That honor goes to vitamin C, although it wasn't named like that. But in the 1700s, the Scottish physician James Lind discovered that the reason that British soldiers and British sailors would develop scurvy was because they had very restricted diets, especially if they were on long ocean voyages. They didn't have any kind of citrus fruits at all, nothing that contained what we eventually learned was vitamin C. And he suggested that on these ocean voyages, they take along limes. And this, of course, to this day, British sailors are referred to as limeys. And now we know what is in there is vitamin C. Of course, the name came after A and B had been taken. And since that time, we've discovered that there are many substances in our food which we require in order to stay healthy, and we've been giving them letters of the alphabet. Vitamin E was the next one. There was also a D. Vitamin K is a bit more interesting because it doesn't really come in sequence of the alphabet. It was discovered by a Danish scientist who realized that it had an effect on the coagulation of the blood. And in Danish language, coagulation starts with the letter K, so they called it vitamin K. Today we have 13 vitamins which we know we must have in our diet to prevent deficiency diseases. We don't know how much really we should have for optimal amounts. Vitamin C, a few milligrams a day will prevent scurvy, but we think that more is indeed better in the sense that there are certain health functions in the body that vitamin C has. Antioxidant potential is what we talk about, and we think about 200 milligrams a day is probably what we need. Vitamin marketing is a fascinating area. In some cases, they even refer to substances as being vitamins, which really are not. Today, there's a substance being sold under the name of vitamin O, which is guaranteed to pep up people. Turns out that it's a little bit of oxygen dissolved in water. It is nonsense. I think in vitamin O, the letter O should stand for absolutely outrageous.